winning World War II, unethical contracts, and controversial partnerships. The Mafia has spread like an aggressive cancer to not only infect, but rip the mantle from the U.S. government. This is the story of the Mafia family that controls the U.S. government. The Mafia infiltrates the U.S. government. Crime has always existed in the U.S., but with the revolution of organized crime to give birth to the Mafia, the U.S. saw the rise of criminal families that rose not only to rival the government in terms of organization, but also sophistication. These crime families weren't just small-time gangs that traded drugs for little power. These were crime families that rose to absolute power and spread tentacles to the heart of the government. And this all started with one man, Charles "Lucky" Luciano, who set foot in New York to rule. This man saw their criminal organization crumbling on a foreign soil and was determined to take over New York just like they took over Sicily back home. To tackle this, he had to stop the rivalry and excess disputes that existed amongst the Mafia families. Therefore, he took a big step in 1931 to eliminate his main rivals and mobilized the main crime families. One of the heads of the five families, Salvatore Maranzano, had done part of the job already by being the backbone that held the five families together. But Maranzano went a bit too far by wanting to be the supreme boss of the five bosses. Maranzano wanted the other families to be reporting to him, and the other families detested this idea. Maranzano knew this and saw his second-in-command, Luciano, as a threat to him. Therefore, he decided to eliminate him and some of the other family heads. But Luciano saw his plan from afar and played Uno reverse on him. With Maranzano gone, Luciano became the #1 boss in the U.S., but he corrected Maranzano's mistake. Rather than declare himself the boss of all bosses, he created a commission, a body that governed all Mafia activities in the U.S. The commission consisted of the heads of the five families, and to make a decision, they would all meet to make a vote. This democratic approach was needed to stabilize the Mafia in New York, and though Luciano didn't declare it, he inevitably became the boss of bosses. Things were balanced for a while, up until Luciano was arrested and sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison on June 7, 1936. However, the prison walls didn't hinder his power as he continued to manage the affairs of not just his family, but other families as well. The Second World War started with him in prison, and in 1940, when the United States decided to take sides in the war, was when things got interesting. The moment the United States picked sides, they also became targets of the war, and the German submarine troops began targeting the ships they were using to send supplies to their allies. About 80 ships were being sunk per day, and the U.S. government was lost as how to tackle this. After sniffing out a terrible spy group known as the Duquesne Spy Ring, their paranoia increased, and they feared that there might be more spies on the ground without their knowledge. They tried sending an undercover policeman to the New York harbor, their major harbor at the time. But the man was unable to get information as the Italian immigrants that dominated the docks were very tight-lipped. After numerous attempts, they found out that the men feared the imprisoned Luciano more than they feared the U.S. government. The government was still very stubborn to negotiate with Luciano, up until he caught their full attention by burning down the SS Normandy from prison. So the government went with their tail between their legs to discuss the Mafia boss behind bars. Although they made it very clear that Luciano would be getting nothing out of the deal, the Mafia boss actually granted their request and allowed his men to report to them about possible Nazi spies that might be on the docks, as well as any plans to attack their ships that might be brewing. This plan worked, and the U.S. government rewarded the Mafia boss by transferring him to a better prison, Great Meadow Prison. The U.S. government soon needed the Mafia boss's help once again when they wanted to infiltrate Italy through the island of Sicily. At this point, the Italian government was waging war against the Mafia bosses, and it was hard to get information around, but not for Luciano, and the U.S. government knew this. They met with the Mafia boss once again, and though they made it crystal clear that they were still not offering him anything, the Mafia boss obliged and got his men to get in touch with the Mafia bosses hiding in Italy. This collaboration was once more a success, and they were able to take control of a large part of Sicily just 2 weeks after landing. With the end of the war in 1945, the U.S. government didn't want to give credit to the Mafia boss for helping them in the war. Rather, they gave him a deal to deport him to Italy in 1946. Although Luciano claimed that he was a U.S. citizen at this point, he agreed to the deal because he had accomplished what he had wanted all along: infiltrate the U.S. government and resurrect the power of the Mafia back in Sicily. Helping the U.S. government win such a critical war solidified that the Mafia wasn't just a small-time crime gang, but was a large and sophisticated organization that operated very similar to the government. And though the U.S. government wasn't willing to admit it, it was evident in their actions. The Kennedy controversy. Frank Costello, Luciano's very close friend, and other Mafia bosses like Joseph Bonanno, Carlos Marcello, Sam Giancana took over to burrow further into the U.S. government. Before World War II, the highest the Mafia did was pay the police and judges off not to interfere in their business. But after burrowing a hole into the government, they became more aggressive. And like a cancer, they spread further by involving in labor unions and even going as far as fixing elections to put their friends in positions of power. Allegedly, Joseph P. Kennedy, father of former President John F. Kennedy, had similar links with the Mafia. Kennedy, who was an important figure during the Prohibition era, was suspected of not just making profit from Mafia-headed illegal liquor distribution, but of also colluding with them to make sure that JFK won the election. JFK did win the election, but he cracked down on organized crime with so much force that it is rumored that this might be the reason why he was assassinated by the very people who put him in power. In their investigation of JFK's death, the U.S. House Select Committee on Assassination stated, with respect to Mafia boss Carlos Marcello, the committee found that Marcello had the motive, means, and opportunity to have President John F. Kennedy assassinated, though it was unable to establish direct evidence of Marcello's complicity. Frank Costello was not only very close to Luciano, but was a very close associate of the Gambino family. This same man was also suspected to have very close connections to Joseph Kennedy and might have also helped bolster the Kennedy family political dynasty. Another fact that was so hard to ignore was that both JFK and Sam Giancana, another Mafia boss who helped with the Kennedy election, shared the same mistress, Judith Campbell Exner. Giancana has not only publicly bragged that JFK won because of him, but has also implied that Exner remained a link between both of them, even after JFK became president, sharing information between the duo. This further became clear in the government-assigned assassination that was handed to Giancana. The two operations Luciano helped the U.S. government with, Operation Underworld and Operation Husky, remained a well-hidden secret up until the 1970s when they became released to the public. However, through the decades up until the release, John Edgar Hoover, the FBI head, maintained that the Mafia didn't exist in the United States and decided not to investigate their activities. Apparently, Frank Costello and Meyer Lansky were in possession of racy photos of Hoover and his protege, FBI Deputy Director Clyde Tolson. Hence, Hoover was too scared to cross the Mafia and made sure no investigations were made regarding the Mafia up until the 1957 Appalachian meeting that got raided. With a meeting involving the major heads of the U.S. Mafia families thrown into the public view, Hoover could no longer deny the existence of the Mafia. Then the 1970s also brought along the illumination of the role the Mafia played to help the U.S. win the war. The FBI wasn't the only government faction that sided with the Mafia, as the CIA even took it too far by hiring Giancana to assassinate Cuban nationalist and future president Fidel Castro. The CIA gave the Mafia pills to introduce into Castro's meals, but after many failed attempts, the assassination was recalled. JFK and Giancana's mistress Exner testified that she shared information about Castro between both her lovers. Talking about the incident, Giancana referred to the CIA and the Mafia as different sides of the same coin. Although this assassination attempt happened in 1960, it wasn't until 2007 that CIA documents revealed that the Mafia and the government had colluded once more. Deeply entrenched in the waste management system and other core parts of the country, the Mafia continues to control the U.S. government from behind the scenes. For more dark stories of the underworld, subscribe to the channel and smash the notification bell to never miss an update.